Hey, it's MK, and I am here with a Rainbow Crush layout for you guys today. And today is the color orange, and I'll be combining it with Christy's Beautiful Life 30 Days of Sketches. And today's sketch is by Cindy Thayer Brown. So I started this layout at the retreat. This was the very last layout on the last day of the retreat. And you know, I always think that I can push out a layout while everybody's packing around me. And everybody else is like, stop packing. You guys are stressing me out. So we technically have about 3 or 4 hours before we have to leave. And so everybody thinks that they can get something done or, work on a layout. And I was one of those people. I had this layout left over from my, from the night before, just thinking that if I have everything laid out, then I'll just want to start it as soon as I wake up. But things did not happen that way. So what I'm sharing with you guys is literally the scraps I pulled out for this layout, because if you look at Cindy's sketch, it is just a whole bunch of squares on top of a larger square on top of your base square. And I thought, okay, I could use all of my photos and then have tiny little squares that fill in the gaps from those photos. So I'm going to use a little bit more photos than what Cindy wrote down. I don't know if she just wrote 4 photos down or if she was just indicating that these little squares are meant to be photos. Well, I have rectangle squares. Well, that's not a thing, but I have rectangles, and I'm trying to figure out how to apply my rectangles in a way that I still hold to the design, but yet make rectangles work instead of doing squares. And I'm going to do a little bit of mixed media as opposed to the stitching that she recommends in her sketch. She has lots of little suggestions, which I think is pretty cool, especially if you're stuck and looking at a pretty plain Jane sketch, right? And there's no color to it. It's just, this is how my sketches always looked. I hand drew all my sketches. I didn't even know those programs that really cool sketch artists do nowadays even existed. I always hand drew everything. I went from a grid design or notebook to a dot notebook, so that way the dots weren't as obstructive as the grid was. And so when I see sketches like this, I get super excited because it's like, yay, I'm not alone. But I decided that I wanted to do mixed media because I felt like all this orange would look like the sunset that my daughter took in these photos. So it was a super cool night. We were at our favorite bar and grill, our recent favorite bar and grill. We used to do another one that was closer to home, but that one has switched hands several times. And when you switch hands, it's a little rocky at the beginning. Well, this one is a little rocky all the way around. And so we had to find a new one. And our friends actually bought a local bar and they changed it into a bar and grill. And we love it. We love everything about it. The atmosphere, the people. I mean, not just that they're our friends, but we just love everything about it. And sometimes we're there early in the morning, sometimes we're there in the afternoon, and then, of course, sometimes we are there late in the day. And during certain seasons, our sky lights up like fire when the sun sets, and it is amazing. And I have to tell you guys, I usually am not awake for said sunsets. So I rely on my children to take these pictures for me. And so my daughter used my husband's phone and just started snapping all these pictures over the fence and next to the road of this gorgeous sunset. So it's not our usual spot where we take sunset pictures, but it's good to have a variety in your album, right? So here I am just trying to figure out how to make all this work. I wanted to cover up 2 of the squares using my title, which is perfect because this little title came from my mind's eye way back in the day. It's from the So Sophie collection, as well as the little journal spot, but I'm not going to use it as the journal spot. I'm going to use it in place of two of my little squares. And then I had all these little scraps from 49 and Market, actually two different collections. One was the Elena collection, and the other one I think is a color spectrum collection. I'm not really sure. I can't remember exactly where, but I believe that's what it is. And so I used all of those to fill in the gaps where my photos, I didn't have enough photos. And I think it's absolutely perfect. Then I came home. So the retreat was done. It was over with. I clearly didn't finish it at the retreat. But when I got home, I was able to, sit down and relax and thought, you know what? I tried to make this layout work without that extra square. Why? Because that's how I am. And then I realized it needs that extra square. So I went through my stash that says reads as a solid, and I have them in rainbow order. It is just basically anything that has that I could read as a complete solid piece that I would use as a background, such as this. I happen to have two of these pieces of paper. They are from a super old, close to my heart collection, but I cut off the branding strip and I cut them apart before even recording because I'd already done the math to get the work done, and it took hours, you guys. I don't know why, but I finally had to rely on just gluing it all down and hoping that when I cut it apart, I wouldn't mess up the cuts. Literally, that's how I had to do it, and I didn't record the process. I apologize about that. But it also took a while to wrap my brain around all those wonky scraps and try to cut them into rectangles. So that took a long time, and I just didn't really feel like it needed to be recorded. So I've got my grid going on, and now I am just decorating all of the little blank spaces. And I do have two photos that are in the, I guess that would be the vertical. See, I always get confused. Horizontal is flat, vertical is up and down. So in the vertical, and I thought the grid that, or the journal spot was perfect for that because it was one solid space, and it actually took up 3 different areas. And that was where I was having a hard time, is I was trying to squish this down to where I only had 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and I wanted the journal spot to only take up 2 spots. And then I realized I needed to bring it down 1 more line in order for it to look good and take up more space. And all that good stuff. And I also decided to bring in the second piece of this blue polka dot that I had, just because I feel like I got a little too messy with my mixed media background. I feel like I went too close to the edges. I didn't want it to be that far out. I just wanted it to be a blur behind my blocks. And of course, when I add another block to the grid, now I'm looking at, oh, my stars, I just don't have enough mixed media on there. So I'm kind of glad I went overboard on the mixed media because of the grid that I have now, but it still looks like it's unfinished. So I pulled out the second piece so I could have that square around it. Now I'm just taking all of these awesome pieces from the Spectrum Sherbert and Spectrum Gardenia, I think is what it is, collections. So anything that was orange, I pulled out. And then I also had these little strips left over from my, the Grateful Heart collection from Pretty Little Studio. And so I added those as well, just to add a little bit more of that orange and yellowy colors to bring out that sunset. And I really feel like this combination of color being orange and blue brought out these photos. Like, my photos truly pop off this page just because of the color combination that I can't really say I chose, because the orange was for Rainbow Crush, right? And it just all fell into place after that. All right, so I also love roughing up my edges when I do a huge background like this. Now, normally I would have gutted my paper, but since I already started with my pictures, I didn't have that option, or I would have definitely just used the one piece, gutted it, and then used the other piece to mat all of these pictures. My brain did not think that way, since I'd already halfway started this whole layout. I almost did it backwards from how I normally do a layout, but in the end, it worked out. I got my bearings and I figured it all out. I do still have one strip. Those watercolory strips of paper are from a Stampin' Up! Collection. Way back in the day, they did some watercolory flower papers and whatnot, and I ended up with a couple of them, not the whole collection, which is weird because I don't know how I end up like that. I think a friend of mine and I split the papers up because there was some that I wanted, but not the whole collection. I'm going to finish this layout off with these rub-ons. Again, these are from the Spectrum, Spectrum Gardenia collection by 49 and Market. And I'm slowly working through getting rid of all the colors. And surprisingly enough, the one I have the most of is like a teal color that I'm just having a hard time using up. All right, you guys, so that is my layout for today. And like I said, I love roughing up the edges on layouts like this because then you don't have to get everything perfect and straight. I absolutely love that little trick because it looks like a well put together layout, but yet if you look close enough, not all the squares are the same size. Not all the squares line up perfectly. Or I should say they're rectangles, but not everything is par. And the roughing up really does help. So Cindy, thank you so much for allowing us to use your sketch. Actually, this was for day 4, but I used it for today, which is technically supposed to be for day 8, but I'm always behind on something, right? If it's not one thing, but I'm always there, even though I'm just slightly behind. All right. Again, thank you so much, Cindy, for letting us use your sketch for this series. We really do appreciate it. I had fun trying to figure it out with my photos. It was great. I loved it. All right, you guys, again, thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I will check y'all later. Bye.